Hello and welcome back to Art Masters with me, Mrs. Portilla. Today we're going to be doing surreal landscapes by Rene Magritte. Surreal means dreamlike, not real. So Magritte actually liked to paint realistically, but then he made it surreal or dreamlike by placing objects that really shouldn't be there. And so he liked to trick your mind. He sometimes made objects so big that it even made it more dreamlike or surreal. So today we're going to be doing a surreal landscape using some overlarged, out of context or out of place objects, like maybe an apple floating above the window or the ground. Or maybe a giant lemon floating instead of the sun. So let's go ahead and get started on our surreal landscape project. Okay, so to get started, I want you guys to watch first, but we're going to have our cloud paper. So we want to make sure that we're coloring on the printed side with the cloud, and you could turn it any way you want. And then you're going to get your scrap piece of white paper. We're going to use this as a mask, basically something to protect the sky. So I want you to watch first, like I said. So you want to come down to about here, this is about halfway. We want to go less than halfway because we don't want a huge ground. So I'm going to hold down my mask and then I'm going to grab a darker color of chalk pastel. And actually the broken ones are better. And when we use chalk pastel, we use the side. So it's always a good idea to first use your chalk pastel on your newsprint to make sure the side is all clean and you see how it works. If you use the tip, you're going to get this straight line. We want to use the side, okay? So you're going to hold down with one hand and use the side of the chalk to fill in your space that's showing. Okay, and you see that I kind of had to hold down tight and get in there to the edges to make it go along the side. So then I'm going to use my tissue. Do you see how I still have my mask paper on there? And I'm going to push down and I'm just going to do little circles to blend in the chalk. You don't want to go too hard or you're going to take too much color away. Blend it in nicely. And then you're just going to tap, 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 tap. So go ahead and get your first mask in. Grab a dark pastel and just get that shaded in and mixed. Okay, so now we're going to add another shaded area. So you see when I lift up my mask, this protected my background. So now I'm going to take this again, but I'm going to create another side of the wall. So I can make it about the same thickness or I can make it a little thinner or thicker. I'm going to do it about here and I'm going to hold down and I'm going to use the same color that I used. So go ahead and add your second mask using the same color. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to use our paper and I'm going to place it here. So you see how I'm not going all the way here. I'm going right in between my little, we're gonna call this our floor or our wall for right now. So I'm gonna place that right in between there. So go ahead and watch me. And then I'm gonna take a colored pencil. So since I used green, you could use black because that'll be dark enough. I'm gonna try dark blue or black, something dark. And then you could either use a straight edge, like a ruler, or you could use another piece of paper. I'm gonna use a ruler for this, and I'm gonna place a dot. This is like a perspective dot. I'm just gonna pick kind of a place right about here, okay? Yours doesn't have to match mine completely. It's just a good place to have it. So I am going to now take my ruler. I'm keeping my paper. I'm going to draw right over it. So I'm lining it up with a dot and then I'm going to put mine, I like mine actually going to this corner. Let's try that. Okay, and I drew right over my paper. I'm not moving my paper, I'm keeping it in the same spot. So this is our perspective point, and I'm gonna line up. So depending on how wide you want your floor panels, I'm gonna turn mine about here. And then you're gonna go ahead and do this along the whole paper. So watch me first. And then you're gonna go along this side using the same dot, so it's the same perspective. And when you lift your paper up, now it looks like you have kind of this wall. It's starting to look a little bit three-dimensional. So go ahead and put your paper, add a dot, pick a color or black, and then go along and make your lines with a ruler or using another paper as a straight edge. All right, awesome job. So I'm noticing some of my lines are a little bit light, so I might go over it. You don't have to. I just feel like I wanted to make that a little bit darker using my straight edge. So now we're going to move on to our next step, which is our foreground object. So we want to make something like Magritte. He made realistic drawings, but in a surreal way. So whatever he put in there, it looked realistic, but it didn't make a lot of sense. So like a floating apple. It's kind of realistic with the shading, but apples don't usually float like that. This one is 2 planets through our window or floating above the floor. So we're going to come up with our shape and then we'll decide what we want it to be. So we're going to use our black paper, and you should have a couple of little templates here. So if you want to do one big shape, you're going to trace around with one big shape. If you want to do 2 shapes, you'll fold your paper in half this way. Pinch, 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 pinch. And you'll trace and do the smaller shape. So then once you have your shape, if you folded it, you're going to cut it with the fold. If you did your bigger shape, you're going to cut it along the line. So go ahead and decide if you want to do one big shape or 2 small shapes. And then go ahead and trace with your template and then cut it out. Great, so once you have your shape, now it's time to decide what type of object we're going to put. So Magritte liked to put objects that you typically wouldn't find in a landscape. So you could do, like I said, maybe a fruit, maybe a planet, maybe you have some other ideas, but I'm going to show you a couple of examples. So let's say you wanted to do a planet. Maybe planet Earth, maybe not. I'm gonna use my medium color first. So let's say I'm doing planet Earth, I'm gonna do the water. And you see how I'm using the side of my pastel? Trying to get a lot of color on there. And then I would use my tissue, blend really lightly because we don't wanna take too much off. Good, and we could always add more after. Then I might take, for Earth, I might take my darker green for some of the land masses, right? See, I'm just doing tiny circles. This is just kind of getting that first color down, that first layer down. A little bit of blending. And if I want to do, this is just the first layer, okay? If I want to do, oh, this kind of looks like a lemon. So this didn't cut out perfectly, like a circle. So I'm gonna make this, keep it the way it is and keep it as a lemon. Maybe you wanna trim yours a little bit more to make it look like a lemon, or this person kind of trimmed theirs to look more like an apple. So you could kind of adjust your shape if you really wanted to look like an apple or a different type of fruit. So for the lemon, we're gonna do kind of the same thing. I'm gonna take kind of my medium color. I like to do it on the scratch paper first. And I'm gonna do the little circles. If you wanna do an apple, Let's do a red apple today. I'm going to take my red. Maybe I want to do an orange, like the fruit. Same thing. We're just going to get our first layer down. So go ahead and decide what you're thinking. Are you thinking a fruit? Are you thinking a planet? And we're not getting super detailed yet, and just get that first kind of middle color down, and then we'll add some shading and highlight. Okay, great job, guys. Hopefully you have an idea now what your object is. And I'm just going to remind you about our lights and darks, how to make something look three-dimensional. So here's an orange. So when I move it around, you can see this light is moving, the light source. So it's very light there. And then where my thumb is, there's a little bit of a shadow. Let me set it down. So we can see there's a darker shadow here and a lighter area here, and that's what makes it look three-dimensional, right? So that's what we're gonna do on our shade. I'm gonna start with the lemon. We are going to pick a color that's darker than our original color. So I might start with this brown, and I'm just gonna go along the bottom edge. And my light source is here. So the yellow is already really light, so I'm gonna go ahead with white. And I'm just gonna go along the top to get some white. And if you need to add a little bit more yellow here to blend it, that's fine. And then again, we're gonna use our little bit of our tissue and rub it little circles. Not too hard because we wanna keep some color on there. And then if you have your earth, I did the same thing. I used a little bit of white along the side, and I actually had to use a little bit of black, and I blended it. And if you're doing the apple, you can use a little bit of the brown or a darker color on just the edge, a little bit of yellow for the highlight, maybe even just a little touch of white, and you could always go back in with that same middle color and then blend. So go ahead and start adding some darks and lights for your object, and then blend lightly, and you could always add a little bit more layers as you go. Okay, hopefully you're happy with your shape. It's starting to come alive in a realistic way. So now we're going to make this a little bit surreal or dreamlike by placing our object out of context, which means like kind of in an unlikely way. Now, if I had an apple and I placed it on the ledge, that might look kind of normal, right? Like, oh, I just have an apple sitting on the window. But if I had it floating in the air, and maybe I had my apple and my orange floating in the air, ooh, that looks a little bit surreal. So we're gonna mess around a little bit with our layout because we still want it to be balanced. So like now this side looks a little bit heavy, so maybe I would move these two over here, floating. My lemon, same kind of thing. I could place it right in the center, but that's not very interesting. But maybe I place it over to the side and maybe I tilt it a little bit. So here's some other examples of how some people laid their art out. So you wanna place your object somewhere that looks surreal, but it also makes your composition look balanced. And then when you're happy with where your object is, you're just going to use a little bit of glue and you're gonna glue it down. If you want to go back in with a little bit of colored pencil for a little bit of detail, you can. But again, we want to use a little bit of detail. So for instance, if I'm doing this orange, I may want to add a little stem using my colored pencil. So now it looks a little bit more like an orange. And if you have your apple, you may want to add a little bit of a stem. Maybe it's even coming off of your apple. So if you want to add a little bit of detail just on your drawing, you can. So for my lemon, maybe I'll add a little bit of a point there and a point here. Okay. And for my wall, maybe I want to add a little bit of shading with my colored pencil. but this is very minor details. And then when we're all finished, we can glue our final piece on our black paper, and then we can turn it over and glue our Magritte tag on the back. And of course, the most important part, you want to put your name on the back of your paper. So go ahead, and if you want to add any minute details, go ahead, and you can glue your drawing on your black paper with your name on the back. And hopefully you'll have some time to look at each other's work and evaluate your Magritte surreal landscape. So great job today, guys, with your surreal landscape by Magritte. If you have time to evaluate and look at each other's work, maybe some things we'll point out is the balance of our composition. Does it look balanced? Do you like the composition? Maybe we'll point out some of the shading on our object if someone did a good job with their lights and their darks. Or you guys could point out any other things that you like about each other's work. And we'll see you next time on Art Masters.